In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God. The Word was God. The Word was with God in the beginning. Through him, all things were made, and without him, nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness did not recognize it. The light shines through the darkness, but the darkness didn't even notice. He came to that which was his own, but his own did not receive him. Even in his own land and among his own people, he wasn't wanted. But to those who believed him, to those who believed in his name, to those who believed he was how he claimed and would do what he said, he gave the right to become children of God. And we have seen his glory, the glory that a one and only Son can only receive from his Father, full of grace and truth. And the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. The Word became human and lived here on earth among us. And having become human, he stayed human. He humbled himself. He didn't accept any special privileges. He lived a selfless, obedient life to die a selfless, obedient death. And the worst kind of death at that, crucifixion. But it was our sins that did that to him. He was bruised and wounded for everything that we've done wrong. He was wounded for our transgressions, pierced for our iniquities. He did all this just so we could be whole. And God exalted him to the highest place, gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee would bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth. Every tongue confess that Jesus is the master of all. This is the resurrection, that the Son came and gave his life, that he extended an invitation to know the God of all creation, that he offered us love when we knew no peace, that he offered us relationship when all we knew how to do was keep and break a bunch of rules. This is the resurrection, that in his death we have come to know life, that we can freely offer our life to him.
I want you to go on a little bit of a journey with me, if you will. Imagine with me in your mind that you're living out your day. You go to your job, you work, you come home, you spend time with your family, you go to bed, and you get up and you do it all again tomorrow. Now imagine it even a little bit further, okay? Imagine that it's not 2021 anymore, but imagine that it's the first century. It's 2,000 years ago. It's right around, let's say, AD 30. You don't go to work as a school teacher or a plumber or an electrician. Let's say that you go to work as a fisherman. And so you go out every night to try and catch fish in order to bring that in and sell it and provide a little bit of living money for your family. You do this every night. You come home and then you go out the next night and you go fish again. You live in a part of the world that we now call Israel. It is hot and dry, or it is cold and wet. It's one of the two. And you work hard. And everybody else around you just works hard because that's all you have, is just to work. And so you work hard, your family's together when they can be, and when you're not working and when you're not eating, you're talking about this God that you follow, right? You're talking about the scriptures that have been passed down. Your grandparents passed them down to your parents, and your parents passed them down to you, and someday you plan on passing them down to your kids as well. This is what you do as a family. See, you follow Yahweh. You follow Yahweh. You follow the God of the Old Testament scriptures. You follow the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob. You follow the God of David. You follow the God of Solomon. You follow the God that the prophets talked about so many times in the Old Testament scriptures. You remember growing up, hearing story after story about all these different things that have taken place in the past. You hear story after story of things like creation, where God came in and created everything that there is. You hear stories about how God delivered your ancestors, your relatives, out of bondage, out of slavery in Egypt. You hear stories about this guy named David who was going to be a king. But before that ever happened, you hear a story about how he took a stone and he chucked it at a giant, and the giant fell down dead. You hear stories about the wisdom and the riches of a king named Solomon. You hear story after story about prophets who spoke on behalf of God. You hear stories about a man named Jonah who did everything he could to run away from God like you can actually run away from God. You hear stories about Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel, who, as their people were in exile in Babylon and forced to bow down to a false god, they said, "No, we worship Yahweh." And they held true, and God blessed them. You hear stories about a man named Nehemiah, who left his job serving a king to come back home and lead his people in rebuilding the city that got destroyed. You hear story after story, prophet after prophet, telling about the goodness of God, talking about how God was powerful, how God is all-knowing, talking about the plan that God had for the future. See, interwoven in all of these Old Testament stories is what is coming in the future that you're looking forward to. See, interwoven in all of these stories is this message about a Messiah that is coming. A Messiah that is going to come and going to save the world. See, throughout all these Old Testament stories, there's literally hundreds of messages about a Messiah that's going to come, who's going to be literally God in the flesh, who is going to live amongst the people, who is going to rule, who is going to conquer, who is going to reign above all. And you have no idea what that's going to look like, but you look forward to it. You anticipate it, right? And so you live your day doing this. But one of the things that you've known, and that generations even before you have known, is that there's been a time where all of these stories, you hold on to the ones that you have, but there's no new stories. See, there's a time where about 300 years for us now in 2021, we look at it as the difference between the last page of the Old Testament and the first page of the New Testament. For them living in that time period, it was 300 years of silence. No prophets, no new stories, no new words from God. And so you hold on. You hold on to what you know because it's all you have. You hold on to the stories that you have and you pass them down to the next generation so that they can hold on to it as well. You have a whole nation. You have a whole tribe. You have a whole people group waiting in anticipation for what they have been promised from these stories, from these messages. And so you wait. So imagine, go with me there in your mind. It's just a normal day. It's morning. You have been out all night doing what you do. You have been in your boat with your brother. You have been fishing, and it has not been a good night. You did not catch many fish, and so you just decided, you know what, enough is enough. We're going to turn it in for the day. So you bring your boats to shore. You start packing up the nets. You start cleaning your equipment. You're going to put it away, get some rest so you can go out later on, and you can do it all over again. And so it's just a normal day. But as you're cleaning things up, as you are putting away your equipment, off in the distance, you see a crowd that's gathered. And you're like, well, that's unusual. That doesn't usually happen. Like, crowds don't usually gather here, but whatever. So you keep going and doing your work. But soon the crowd has kind of made its way towards you. And the crowd is clearly following an individual. Like there's one guy that is out in front, and he's talking, and everybody is listening, trying to hear what this one individual has to say, but you keep working because you have work to do. Well, eventually the man comes over to you. The man comes over, and he looks at you, and he says, hey, will you take me out on the water? I have a message that I want to share with the people. Well, dude, I'm kind of working right now, but I guess. And so you get in the boat and you get him in the boat and you take him out a little bit and he starts talking. It's like almost he's teaching and you start listening. He's piqued your interest a little bit because he's not teaching the way that anybody else you have heard before. He's teaching about the kingdom of God. And he's got your attention. He spends some time talking and he spends some time teaching. And after a while, he's done and he turns to you and he says, take your nets and throw them off over there. Take them and throw them off that side of the boat. Dude, I've been out all night, right? Like this, in my mind, I go, dude, I've been working all night. We've caught hardly any fish. There's no fish here right now. Like, it's a waste of time. I cleaned my equipment. Let's just go. But for whatever reason, when the man says, hey, throw your net over there, something inside of you, feel it. Something inside of you pushes you to go, just do what the man says. Just throw your net over there. Just do what this man says. So you set the nets out. You throw them out. And immediately the nets become so full of fish that they can't handle anymore. The nets start breaking. You call over some of the guys who are fishing with you and you say, hey, bring your boats over, come help. And you join up together and you put your nets together and you start pulling the fish into the boats and it fills one boat and it fills two boats to the point to where the boats are about ready to sink because it has so much fish in it. Something has got your attention now. Something's grabbed a hold of your mind. You want to know what the heck this guy is all about, right? You want to know who this guy is. So you get your fish to the shore. You do what you need to do, but you've got something else on your mind, right? Like you want to find out who this guy is. And so as soon as you can, you run up to this guy, and what do? There's nothing else to do but fall down to the ground and go, I am unworthy to be here. I am unworthy. I don't know who you are, man, but I am unworthy to be in your presence. And you fall down and you just share this with the man. And the man looks at you and he has a smile on his face and he looks to your brother and he says, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I want you to follow me because I'm going to teach you how to fish for people. Come follow me and I will make you into fishers of men. What do? There's nothing else to do. You drop everything. You leave everything behind and you go and you follow that man. And here's what happens over the course of about 3 years. You follow this man and you see him do some incredible things. You hear him preach a sermon that's called the Sermon on the Mount that challenges everything that you have been taught your entire life. Everything that you thought that you had believed, it challenges that and it turns it upside down. You see him feed over 5,000 people with just a couple loaves of bread and a couple fish. Later on that night, you see him in the midst of a storm raging around you, right? You see him walk on water. And he calls you out of the boat. Hey, step out on the boat. Step out on the water with me. And you step out on that water and you walk on water for a couple steps before you take your eyes off of him and you realize what's going on around you. But you did it and you walked on that water. Man, over the course of time, you see him heal people who are sick. You see him raise people who are dead. You see him interact with people who you have been told all of your life, you need to shun them, you need to stay away from them. Don't interact with them. Jesus walks up to them and interacts with them. You and a couple others get an opportunity to climb up a mountain with this man. And you get to experience a transfiguration where this man becomes like a glowing sun. And because that's not enough for one experience, you turn and you look to both sides and you see Moses and Elijah sitting next to you. You get to experience that. I mean, think of some of the things that you get to do and you get to see. And remember some of the things that you've heard him say, right? How he's ushering in a new way of worshiping God. How his followers will be identified by their love that they have for one another. He talks about how we must interact with people both in grace and in truth. He talks about how life is found in and through him alone. And these are some of the things that he talks about. And you spend 3 years of your life following this man, listening to him, watching him, learning from him. And then one night, something changes a little bit. One night, it's in the midst of the Passover season, and you and the other followers of this man, you go up to this room, and you're going to celebrate the Passover feast together. And in the midst of this, a couple things happen that are out of the ordinary. In the middle of kind of this time together during this meal, this teacher, this leader of the group, this mentor gets up from his position at the table, and he goes and he picks up a bowl of water, and he starts doing the thing that only the lowest of low people do. He starts washing everybody's feet. And you resisted at first. You can't wash my feet. But he goes around to each individual and washes their feet. Washing feet was something that the servants did, that the lowest of low servants did. And yet he lowered himself to that place. Another thing happened that night. After the dinner, you leave that room and you go down into this beautiful garden, and you can tell his demeanor has changed a little bit at this point. You can tell that something is going on. He has something on his mind that's very serious. And he says, listen, I want you guys to wait up for me. I'm going to go pray, and I want you guys to wait up for me. And he goes off, and he begins praying to God. And you and the others, man, you tried, right? You really tried to wait up. You really tried to stay awake, but the reality is it's late. You've had a long day, and you just fell asleep. But you got a little glimpse of what was happening. You got a little glimpse of what he was doing. Off in the distance, you could see there was something wrong. You could see he was anxious. He was upset. He was maybe even a little frustrated at something. And you could see the anxiety in him. You could see him, how he was pleading with God about something that was coming. You could see that he was frantic about something. And then you could almost feel and you could see a sense of calm just rest over him, to where he just accepts the reality of what is going to happen. Over the next several hours, your life is going to be shaken. Your life is going to be shaken. A lot is going to happen. Jesus comes back to the group, and soon after that, some soldiers come and they arrest him. They take him off. And you don't know what's happening. You don't know why this is happening. You are left alone, though. Something has happened. Maybe he did something. You don't really know. But something has happened to where they have arrested him and taken him away. And so what do you do as a follower of this man? What do you do as a disciple of this man when you don't know? You scatter. You run. You try and get as far away from him as possible because you don't know any better, right? Like you learn some things throughout the night. You learn that they're trying to convict him. They're trying to kill him. And so you start distancing yourself a little bit from him. And people start asking, hey, weren't you seen with him? Weren't you one of the guys who followed him? Weren't you one of the guys who was close to him? And what do? You distance yourself a little bit more. And over the course of hours, our character that we're trying to envision has distanced himself so much that he doesn't actually witness anything else that happens that night. But here's what happened, because you hear about it. They take him, and they toss him from religious court to government court. They falsely accuse him of things that were not true. They put him in front of a crowd of people, and the crowd cries, "Crucify him! Nail him to a cross and kill him. Oh, and by the way, release to us a known criminal. Let that man go free." And so they take him. And behind closed doors, they beat him to within inches of his life. And then if that wasn't enough, they take him out into the street and they throw a heavy beam on his back. And they make him carry that beam through the streets of the town up a hill to where his death is going to happen. And you can almost imagine it. Follow him up that road and up that hill. Up on the hill is already 2 crosses that are there with 2 criminals that are already crucified there. And they get the man up there and they throw the beams on the ground. They throw the man down on top. And they take nails and they drive them into his wrists, into the wood. And they take nails and they drive it through his ankles into the wood. And then they raise that cross up. And the man, Jesus Christ, is nailed to it. Slowly the crowd goes home. Slowly people go from making fun of him just to getting tired of it. And they just wander away. Eventually, just a few guards and some of his closest friends are there with him, and that's it. And slowly, over the course of hours, he dies on the cross. Slowly, in a matter of hours, his life slips away from him. And then he was taken off that cross, and they went and found a tomb that they could borrow from somebody, and they put him in that tomb. And they got a large rock, and they closed the entrance of that tomb. And 2 guards stood watch over this tomb in fear that somebody was going to come and steal the body. And there he laid, dead. It's Friday, but Sunday's coming. I think it's difficult sometimes for us. 2,000 years after this happened, I think it's difficult sometimes for us to fully appreciate what is happening in this moment. Because what we have that they did not have 2,000 years ago is the end of the story, right? We know how this story ends. We know what happens 3 days later. And so for us, it's almost as you read through this, it's almost as if, we can just read it in anticipation of what we already know. But I think from time to time, we should put ourselves in their shoes as much as we can. We should put ourselves in their shoes. Put yourself in the place of Peter, for instance, and bring a little bit of a new appreciation for what this was like for them witnessing it firsthand 2,000 years ago. I mean, think about this. Just try and appreciate it. Think about this. The man that you have followed for 3 years of your life, the man that you have dedicated your life to, the man that you have put your faith in, the man that mentored you, the man that taught you, the man that was your friend, the man that you had seen do miracle after miracle, was laying in a tomb dead. They killed him on a cross. Your friends put him in a tomb, and he's dead. That's not how this story was supposed to go. That's not, in your mind, how this story was supposed to go. And so if we can, as much as we can, feel the emotions that they were maybe feeling at this moment, in this time. The closest disciples of Jesus, the ones who knew him, the ones who Jesus knew the best, the ones that had spent almost every day for the last 3 years of their lives together, try and feel the emotion of that. I tried to do that. I think you can feel a few different things. Maybe you can relate to some of these. Maybe you feel scared. Maybe you feel scared. In this moment, they've taken your mentor, your teacher, this guy who's supposed to be the Messiah. They took him. Maybe you feel scared because maybe your mind immediately goes to, are they going to come after me now? Are they going to come arrest me now? Are they going to try and kill me now? Are they going to associate us with him? Do I need to be in fear of my life? Maybe you feel scared. Maybe if you were them, maybe you feel this. Maybe you feel confused. Maybe you're saying, I'm confused about this whole thing. It's not going according to plan. This is not the way that we thought this was supposed to go, right? Like this was not what we were told was going to happen. I don't get it. Jesus, this Messiah figure, for a lot of them, was going to come in strong and lead an army and defeat Rome, and that's what they thought how it was going to go. And so put yourself in that place. You probably have some confusion going on in your mind a little bit. Or maybe, this is probably where I would land. I bet this is how I would feel. For a number of different reasons. I just wasted the last 3 years of my life following a man who was a liar. I think it's okay to feel this. I have to believe that at some level there was there was anger for these guys because they just didn't understand what was really happening here. And they're now in this kind of place of confusion or uncertainty. And some of us naturally kind of move towards this emotion of anger and being mad. Or maybe you're like this. And maybe this was them. I'm lost now. Our mentor, our teacher, our leader, the Messiah is gone. He's dead. What am I supposed to do now? Where am I supposed to go now? Who do I go to? What am I supposed to do? Like, this man has been their teacher for 3 years. They've followed him only for 3 years, right? They didn't have anything else. They didn't have some other guy that they could follow on the back burner. This was it for them. They'd put so much of their life into being his disciple, and now he's dead. He's gone. And so they're left in an instant trying to figure out what to do from here. So we pick up on the story about 3 days later. And a lot happens in a short amount of time. A lot happens rather quickly. A couple of the women go out to the tomb because some more work needs to be done on the body for the burial. And so a couple women go out there and they get to the tomb and they realize not only are the guards not like there anymore, the stone is not in front of the entryway anymore, and they look inside and there's no body. This is a rise for concern. Like, this should be concerning for them. And there is nothing there. And so at first, we have to kind of believe that their minds immediately go to somebody kind of overtook the guards, they pushed the stone out of the way, and they stole the body of Jesus, right? Like, this is kind of where we have to go to with this. And so the body's stolen, somebody broke into the tomb and took it. But soon after that, as maybe they're processing this together, 2 men show up right next to them. And these 2 men are a little bit different because when you look at them, it kind of looks like their clothes are glowing, right? And so 2 men show up and they say, hey, don't worry. Don't worry. Jesus, who you were looking for, he's not here anymore. Guess what? He's alive. He's alive. Jesus is alive, the men say. And so the 2 women run back to where the other disciples had gathered together. They run back because they are excited. They want to share this news with them. And so they run into the house. They run into the room. Jesus is alive, they say. Jesus is alive, they say. The others don't believe them. They don't believe him. And so Peter and John, right, our Peter, who we're kind of identifying with here, they take off towards the tomb. They hightail it to the tomb as fast as they can get there. They run up to the tomb, they look inside, and it is empty. They don't immediately go to Jesus is alive. They immediately go to somebody stole the body. Somebody stole the body, right? He's still dead. Somebody stole the body. And so again, whole range of emotions has to be taking place, right? Like you're feeling emotions here, and so they storm it back to the house. But Mary had followed them. And Mary goes up to the tomb. Understandably, she's emotional at this point. Understandably, she's feeling all the feels, right? And she's looking in there. She's trying to make sense of this in her mind as well. And here's what happens. She turns around, and she sees in front of her a man. Now, what we know from this is that this was Jesus. I would imagine that if we were there 2,000 years ago, and we were all kinds of emotional because of what had taken place over the last few days, all kinds of emotional because it looks like somebody robbed the tomb of this Messiah that we'd been following, I bet our minds would not be thinking very well at that moment either. And so what Scripture tells us is that she turns around, she looks at this man, doesn't recognize that it's Jesus right away. Her mind's got to almost catch up, right? And kind of process what's taking place. But over the course of a conversation, she goes from just believing that maybe this is an angel to realizing this is Jesus. This is Jesus. And he is alive. Jesus is alive. And he showed himself to Mary first. There's something in that as well. She realizes who's before her. Man, I want to watch that conversation, but we don't. what we learn is that she realized it was Jesus, and she takes off back towards the others. She wants to share the news again, and again, they don't believe her. So over the course of several hours, things start to change. Jesus starts revealing himself to more and more of the people. Like 2 of the followers of Jesus that are unnamed are walking from one town to another. And Jesus actually shows up with them as they are walking, as they're kind of talking about what's happened over the last few days. Another guy just appears and starts talking with them. They don't realize that it's Jesus, right? But they have a whole conversation with them. They go into a house, and it's not until they get into the house that they realize that this has actually been Jesus the entire time on the road with them. And so they now have this encounter with Jesus. And so they realize Jesus is alive. They hightail it back to where the others are, and they want to share this message with them. They get back with them. They're saying, Jesus is alive. We've seen him. We've talked to them. And in the middle of that conversation, in an instant, Jesus shows up in the room, alive. And again, you almost have to allow for your mind to catch up to what's actually going on in front of you, right? Like Jesus, like you look like him, but you should be dead. Like I saw you die. Like you got to kind of process through that a little bit. But Jesus, in this conversation, they touch him. They see the holes in his hands, the holes in his feet. They sit down and have a meal with him. Jesus is alive. Jesus is alive. Everything is starting to make sense a little bit more for them. And they have a celebration in this moment. They're overjoyed because Jesus is alive. And you finish out the rest of the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And they all end a little bit differently, but what we learn as we kind of put them all together is Jesus had a series of a few weeks where he revealed himself to more and more people over time. He reveals himself to all of the disciples who are left. Then there's kind of this greater group of followers of him. He revealed himself to them. And then at one point, you read that he actually revealed himself to about 500 people at one time. And over the course of this time, he just continues to be with his people, and he continues to teach them and to answer questions for them and to talk about what's coming, and they're with him, and they interact with him, and they get to touch him. I mean, they get to just experience this a little more time with Jesus. And then we get into the book of Acts, right? The book of Acts actually begins with Jesus' last moment here on earth, and we get into chapter 1. And Jesus has this kind of beautiful kind of sending out of the disciples in order to go out and to lead the church, right? And then he leaves them. And in chapter 2, then we read about how Jesus sent the Holy Spirit to be with his followers. And there's this whole big kind of scene in this room. And then people kind of gather around, and Peter has his first sermon. And we just start going through the chapters of the church. And we start to see how the apostles start to preach, and they start to grow the church, and they start to heal in the name of Jesus. And they just start to do all these things that Jesus has called them to do. And the church grows and grows and grows. And people continually come to faith in Jesus, and lives are being changed, and people are believing in him. And it says thousands and thousands of people are being added to the church on a regular basis. Like, this is what is happening. In the matter of weeks after the crucifixion and resurrection. Here's the thing. None of this happens, what we've just talked about. None of this happens without the resurrection of Jesus. None of it happens without Jesus walking out of that tomb alive. Without the resurrection, Jesus was just another good man for the history books. Without the resurrection, Jesus was just a man who was kind of popular, right? Without the resurrection, Jesus was just a man who said some good things. Without the resurrection, Jesus was just a kind of morally sound man. I mean, without the resurrection, Jesus was just a man. Jesus was just a man. But this truth, the resurrection of Jesus, changes everything. This is the reality. This is the truth. This changes our world. It changes our lives. It changed the scope of the future of the world 2,000 years ago. I mean, think about it. If Jesus didn't walk out of that grave, we would not be here right now. This is what Peter said. In Peter's first sermon that he gave, Acts chapter 2, this is right after the Holy Spirit came on them. This is in part what Peter says. He says, "Men of Israel, listen to these words. This Jesus the Nazarene was a man pointed out to you by God with miracles, wonders, and signs that God did among you through him, just as you yourselves know. Though he was delivered up according to God's determined plan and foreknowledge, you used lawless people to nail him to a cross and kill him. God raised him up, ending the paths of death because it was not possible for him to be held by it." Let's jump down to verse 32. God has resurrected this Jesus. We are all witnesses of this. Therefore, since he has been exalted to the right hand of God and has received from the Father the promised Holy Spirit, he has poured out what you both see and hear. For it was not David who ascended into the heavens, but he himself says, "The Lord declared to my Lord, 'Sit at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstools.' Therefore, let all of the house of Israel know with certainty that God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Messiah." The resurrection of Jesus changes everything. The resurrection of Jesus changes everything. So, you might be sitting here, you might be hearing this, might be processing through this, and you might be feeling some things. You might be feeling some emotions. And maybe those emotions are not that much different than what potentially the disciples felt in the midst of the chaos that was that first night. Maybe you find yourself sitting here saying, in the midst of everything else going on in my life, I'm scared. I'm scared. I'm scared of what's happening. I'm scared of my future. I'm scared of what could happen. I'm scared of what did happen, possibly sneaking back up on me. I'm scared of the uncertainties in life. I'm scared. And I need somebody to come in and to rescue me. Or maybe you find yourself in this place where you're saying, man, I'm confused. I'm confused about life. I'm confused about what to do. I'm unsure of my place in this life, of my purpose in this life. Maybe you're saying, I don't know how to navigate all of the different messages that I'm hearing in the world being fed to me from different places. I'm confused about where my happiness should really come from. I'm confused. Maybe you find yourself in this place saying, I'm just mad. I'm just mad. I'm mad. I'm mad at what's happening around me. I'm mad at the state of the world. I'm mad at the state of the country. I'm mad at my family. I'm mad at the things that I can't control. I'm mad at the things that I have controlled. I'm mad at where I see my life going. I'm just mad. Maybe you find yourself here where you're saying, I'm just lost. I'm just lost. I have no direction in life. I have no purpose in life. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do. I'm unsure of what my next step is. And so we just sit in the state of being lost. The truth for all of us, no matter what you're feeling, no matter what kind of emotions are going on, these or others, the resurrection of Jesus changes everything. The resurrection of Jesus gives us hope. The resurrection of Jesus gives us purpose. The resurrection of Jesus gives us a plan, gives us a step, gives us one thing that we can be certain of. Because here's what happened. Jesus changes these things about our lives towards the good, towards his purpose, towards his plan, which is good, right? Jesus changes these things. The resurrection confirms that he has the power to change these things in our lives. I mean, think about throughout the Bible. Think about how Jesus takes time and time again, person after person who's just a normal, everyday person and transforms them into powerful disciple makers for Jesus, right? On his purpose and on his plan. I mean, think about what Jesus did. Like he took fishermen, normal, everyday, uneducated, nothing special about these guys, fishermen, and made them into leaders of the church. Jesus took tax collectors, like the scum of the earth, and turned them into loving, charitable people on mission for him. We see Jesus take a man later on in the book of Acts named Paul. He was called Saul. When he was named Saul, his mission in life was to go out, hunt down every Christian he could, and kill him. But Jesus took even him, and turned him and transformed him into one of the greatest missionaries that this world has ever seen. And Jesus still does this, right? Jesus still does this today. If we look around, even in ourselves, we can see the transformation that's taken place, right? Where he takes old things and makes them new. He takes ordinary things and makes them great. He takes sinners and makes them close with God. He takes people who are far away from him and draws them closer to him. These are the stories of transformation in the lives of people sitting in this room. It's your story. It's my story. We see it in the life of Peter. Man, how he lived. He was called to follow Jesus, right? And the things that he saw, how he interacted with Jesus, the things that he heard, how he responded when Jesus was arrested, how he ran, right? How he denied being even associated with Jesus. But there's this beautiful picture, right? Right at the end of the Gospels, where Jesus sits down with Peter and he reinstates him into the family. Because that's what Jesus does. This happens because of the resurrection. This happens because of the resurrection. And so, the question is, how do you want your story to go? How do you want your story to go? I mean, maybe you find yourself here in a place to where you're scared, or you're mad, or you're confused, you're lost, or you're feeling something else. You're in this place where you just don't know about life anymore. Maybe you've been running to something, trying to find satisfaction from it, and it's letting you down every time. Maybe you need to run to the right man who can actually bring fulfillment to your life, who can bring peace to your life, who can bring purpose to your life. Maybe you need to run to Jesus. Maybe you find yourself and you're here, and honestly, like, life is good, right? You have your stuff, like you have your house, you have your job, you have your family, you have your health insurance, you have your retirement, like everything's good, right? And everything feels good, and on paper, everything looks good. But I would bet there's a peace inside you, inside your soul. You feel like something's missing. You feel like something's just not there. You can gather all this stuff. You can make all these plans for the future. You can build this kingdom for yourself. But something's not there. Jesus. Jesus is what that needs. Jesus is what fills that hole. Maybe you need to run to Jesus instead of trying just to add more to your kingdom. Paul says it best in Ephesians chapter 2. This is the story of every single one of us. Paul says, and you were dead in your trespasses and sin. This is us. Verse 1 is us. Whether you realize it or not, this is us. We have at one point, and maybe you still are, dead in your trespasses and sins, in which you previously walked according to the ways of this world, according to the ruler who exercises authority over the lower heavens, the spirit now working in the disobedient. We too all previously lived among them in our fleshly desires, carrying out the inclinations of our flesh and thoughts, and we were by nature children under the wrath as the others were also. It's like my favorite verse in the Bible. But God, who takes the messed up, sinful self that we have been in our past and makes something new and makes something better and transforms our lives into something great. But God, who is rich in mercy because of his great love for us that he had for us, made us alive with the Messiah even though we were dead in our trespasses. You are saved by grace. Together with Christ Jesus, he also raised us up and seated us in the heavens in Christ Jesus, so that in the coming ages he might display the immeasurable riches of his grace through his kindness to us in Christ Jesus. For you are saved by grace through faith, and this is not from yourselves, it is God's gift, not from works so that no one can boast. For we are his creation, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared ahead of time so that we should walk in them. I pray that the entirety of those verses from verse 1 through the end of verse 10 is your story. I pray that that's your story. I pray that that's our story, because that is the story of transformation that takes place in our lives when we allow Jesus to come in because of the resurrection. Because of the resurrection. We put our faith into action. We put our faith into action by confessing that Jesus is Lord of our lives. We put our faith into action by continually turning away from sin in our lives on a daily basis and allowing God to transform our lives. We put our faith into action by being baptized into the death, yes, of Jesus, but also into the resurrection of Jesus. And we join with him in that. We put our faith into action by living out our lives, continually following him. This is how we put our faith into action. And so this morning, we want to walk alongside you in that. We want to offer that, and then we want to say, if you want to talk with somebody about what that looks like, don't leave this place without doing that. Myself, the elders of this church, others around this room would be honored to have a conversation with you about this and study with you and talk with you about this. And so myself and Mark will be on stage through the rest of the service time. One or two of our other elders will be in the back of the room through the end of the service. If the time is now for you to talk to somebody, please don't wait. Get up from where you're at and go talk to somebody about this. Let us lock arms with you. Let us study with you. Let us answer questions with you. Let us talk about maybe your doubts or your confusions or your uncertainty about this. But don't leave this place without stepping out and answering maybe that very silent but sure call in your life. Make sure you do that. And for the rest of us here who this maybe is our entire story, right? Verse 1 through 10 is our story. Yes, we were dead in our sins, but we are alive in Jesus because of the resurrection, right? The call for us is very simple, I think. Let's not celebrate Easter just on Easter. Let's not celebrate the resurrection just one day a year. This is not just one day celebration. The resurrection should be lived out in our lives every single day. And we should be allowing the resurrection to show the transformation that God has and is continually doing in our lives every single day. Let's not celebrate it once a year. It's good to come together. It's good to celebrate it once a year, right? Let that not be what we do. We're thankful that you're here. Thank you for joining us here at North Christian this morning. We're glad that you're here. I hope and I pray that you don't leave here without making a decision about how you're going to allow Jesus to change your life because of the resurrection. Heavenly Father, I am thankful for this church. I am thankful for your word. I'm thankful for Jesus. That even in the midst of my sin, even in the midst of my continual sin and my continual struggle, because of him, because of Jesus, because of what he did on the cross, because of how he took my place, how he bore the weight of my sin, I can and am called a child of God. Let that truth be the truth that we hold on to. God, if there's some that are here that have not made that decision to follow you, that have not stepped out and said, yes, I want to grab a hold of the grace that comes through following Jesus. Let us not leave this place without making that decision, without taking that step this morning. And for those of us who have made that decision, who do live this out, let the celebration of Easter, let the celebration of the resurrection not just be a one time a year thing. Let this be a celebration that we live out every single day of our lives, remembering, celebrating, and clinging to the fact that Jesus, you not only went to the cross, but you went to the grave and you walked out of it 3 days later, defeating death. And we can be reconciled with God because of you. We thank you. Thank you for Jesus. Pray this in his name. Amen.